since the Mahama government left office at the end of 2016, every single power purchase agreement, or indeed fuel purchase agreement, the Tema LNG project, has had a take-or-pay component. Take-or-pay is a reality in our situation because of confidence. A 330 megawatt combined cycle plant on the average will cost about $500 million in our sub-region. Is the country director of World Bank saying that the IFC, International Finance Corporation, which is an arm of the World Bank, are they saying they will fund a project worth $500 million and not demand a guarantee or an offtake agreement? I wish the country director had gone a bit back or gotten his researchers to look at the whole.
Even before President Mahama, most of the thermal plants had capacity charges. Just to cite a few examples, Asogli had capacity charges, TICO has capacity charges, Sen Power has capacity charges, Senate has capacity charges, TT2PP has capacity charges. And so capacity charge or capital recovery is not new. But even more importantly, after President Mahama left office, the MPP government, the current MPP government, has signed PPAs that has take-or-pay or capacity charges embedded in them. You'll recall that President Mahama brought in the AXA plant, which is a 370 megawatt plant. We signed it for 5 years. That was during emergency. Immediately the contract expired around June, July. 2 months after, this current MPP administration signed a new contract for the same plant, extending the years from 5 years to 15 good years.
Right. So you have been listening to the Atachia, you've been listening to John Jinapor and Kwabena Donko speaking on this subject, which has been giving a lot of prominence because the chairperson for the Mines and Energy Committee of Parliament, Samuel Atachia, did a press conference, led a press conference, and accused the former president or his administration, John Mahama's administration, of causing financial loss to the state, according to what the media has reported. According to him, the take-or-pay power purchasing agreements, PPA, signed by the erstwhile Mahama administration are tantamount to causing financial loss to the state. And he said, quote, "We wish to state that there is no inferred PPA to Asogli, neither has the car power PPA been extended to a regular PPA of 20 to 25 years. Negotiations for these PPAs are still underway. There is a huge financial overhang because of take-or-pay. Take-or-pay is an inherited trouble, no dispute about it. It is not the making of President Akufo-Addo, and he, Akufo-Addo, kept the lights on." So these are some of the things that Mr. Atachia has been saying, and you remember that the World Bank country director, Pierre Laporte, gave an interview to Joy News, George Weafe, and on the back of that, all of these things are coming up because he stated very clearly that the take-or-pay agreements have cost us a lot. Now, as we understand, over the period, there have been a total of about $368 million. A total of $368 million has been paid for the idle capacities, and there's a further $600 million that has been paid for the cost of reserve margins. So we are talking about a total of $968 million. That's almost $1 billion that has been paid. or spent by the state for what is being said is not needed. Joining me, Dr. Theo Echampong is economist and political risk analyst. Edward Bauer is MP, Bongo, and member Mines and Energy Committees of Parliament. Let's begin with you, Honorable Atachia. What was the point of this press conference that you held? Ghanaians are concerned that those who have this agreement with us are owed, they've not been paid, and there's a threat that may plunge us into dumsor. That's what they are thinking about, and they just want to be assured by their government that this will not happen. So what's the point of your accusations at the former government?
Well, I do not believe that it is my fancy to be doing press conferences. But when you can see that somebody who is in a very, very, very trust-defined situation will want to spew the facts as if nothing is happening, and that maybe this take or pay and the consequential pernicious financial effect on the economy is like a mirage, or it is propaganda, a least much to be desired. And that is why I was of the view that let's converge on truth. Because I keep telling, those people who I'm around with, that I do not believe that energy will wear party colors. I told people that as oxygen is necessary for the body, so energy is essential for any economy. And therefore, when it comes to some critical issues like energy, we shouldn't play propaganda with it. Now, I am of the view that what the country director said, the counterfactuals have not been brought. You don't see it. And if you pay regard to the fact that, somebody is trying to get into our politics, what about what some other think tanks have done? I have in my hand what IEA Ghana, working together with Energy for Growth Hub, which is of Washington, D.C. This is what they came out with. And some say, let me show you that some of these facts have not been contradicted by anybody. And if you pay regard to page 3 of the report, they said something like, this was a case of the Ameri deal, for example, a 250 MW combined cycle gas plant approved at a staggering cost of 510 million, or roughly twice the price of comparable projects. In 2018, excess generation capacity contracted under take or pay PPAs cost the government 320 million in capacity charges, estimated to increase to 620 million annually with the addition of new plants in 2019. These unused supply charges are one of the most significant sources of financial strain on the sector. Cumulative net sector debt was 2.7 billion in 2018, with 30% payable to the private sector. This sum is equivalent to 33% of the government's 2018 tax revenue, highlighting the scale of the financial burden. I've not received any data contradicting these, non-political think tanks coming out with raw data. So this is the truth of the matter. And I'm saying that if you pay regard to what the ministry has just brought out, and you look at it critically, the ministry was commenting on excess capacity charge payments. And I want to quote, on the issue of idle capacity, between 2017 and 2020, the annual cost of idle capacity ranged between 105.4 million US dollars and 3.73.7 million per year. Over the period, the total amount of 368 million has been paid for idle capacities, and a further 600 million has been paid for the cost of reserve margins totaling 968 million United States dollars. We are edging towards 1 billion. Are these inventions? I don't want to do politics at all. Or these are the consequences of the contractual arrangements called take or pay that in the ambulance situation, NDC found itself. They decided to go into these contracts. And I keep telling...
You have been asked the question, for example, that you have said that, there were 43 take or pay power purchase agreements that resulted in the current government being obligated to pay the amounts that you speak about, $320 million in 2018 for unused power charges. You have been told that this is palpably false because from the Energy Commission's 2018 energy statistics there were only 13 thermal plants that operated in 2018, with only 3 signed under President Mahama. So not 43 plants.
Yes, Samson, I think the video is there. I was just telling you that I was quoting from the IEA Ghana and then the Energy for Growth Hub document. And this is what they said, and I was even quoting it. I was not surmising. During the 2011-2016 power crisis, ECG committed to 43 PPAs, while the Minister of Energy signed 3 additional PPAs with EPPs. So that's what I said. And then it went on to say that when MPP assumed power, they terminated, or they terminated 11 of them. That's what I said. I never said at the relevant time the PPAs were 43, and that is why we had excess capacity.
Yeah. So the main question now is, what is the point of your press statements or your press, commentary? What is the point? People need assurance that there will not be doom, so we will not get there. In any case, this government has been in charge of affairs for upwards of how many years? 6 years or more. So what's the complaint about?
The complaint is that we should sanitize the energy environment. So therefore, if the World Bank director is trying to explain some of the crises we are going through, nobody should say that this is propaganda and that he's descending into the arena of conflict. He should mind his own business. These are facts. So the purpose of my press conference was to set the record straight. That look, if anybody said we have not suffered financial losses or we've not spent colossal sums of money as a result of capacity charges, which were the inherited troubles of Akufo-Addo, then he's living in cuckoo's land. He's living in oblivion. And that is why I'm saying that I am not here to make Akufo-Addo look good. But the fact of the matter is that capacity charges has really, really, really brought about financial crisis to this government.
All right.
There's no dispute about it.
So hold on briefly for me. Edward Bauer, what's your reaction to these statements? Of course, the revelations making Ghanaians really, wonder what it is that you were doing during your regime, that you could saddle the country with so much, debt. And in this case, we are talking about power that we don't need, unused capacities.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samson. And then good morning to my senior and my chairman, Honorable Atachia. I will start my discussion by first indicating, because you see that his premise for the statements he's made is based on documents that he referred to. One of them being authored by IEA. Indeed, if you go, I have had the opportunity of reading that 10-page document that was authored by Ishmael Aka, who's now the PURC executive director. and then 1/3 Moses. Go back and look at their sources from which they quoted those figures. All those sources, go back and just look at the footnotes. You realize that the footnotes, the source is coming from newspapers and pronouncements by political operators. So, for example, whether the Minister of Energy or maybe somebody from the government who has made that, it is not from independent sources that they use. And indeed, if you look at that document, they are in their summary, they indicated that because of the non-transparent manner of the PPAs, they are unable to ascertain those facts. And I think that Honorable Atachia has that document, he can read it, because I have seen that document. I've read it before. It's not today, but at least I've read that document before. That being said, I believe that the centrality of this discussion is one, the fact that the energy sector has some colossal source in terms of debt, where saddled with huge debt, that can result in we going back into power curtailment or power rationing. I believe that is the essence of this. And in that discussion, one of the portions of the source of debt is the excess capacity. And that because of the excess capacity payments, we are forced to be saddled with this particular debt. Something, let me first start with the issue of the excess capacity thing. There's always this, and first, let me also state very clearly, just because I may not have time to say that it is important that today that Honorable Atachia is on live TV with me, that together we will agree on a bipartisan format to call for an independent audit on what the excess capacity payments have been as Parliament, because it is within the jurisdiction of Parliament to do that. That being said, look, something, you always hear the argument that is being made that seems to suggest that, look, we have an installed capacity of about 5,200, and that we have a dependable capacity of about 4,700. And meanwhile, our total needs that we need in terms of peak, if you look at our peak demand, the period in a day where we need the largest amount of power, is around 3,500. And so if you net off, you have a huge figure that is there, that's roughly almost around 1,500, almost 2,000. That is idle capacity, or what you call excess capacity. Something, this is a false. One, the fact that the plate capacity on any generating plants is stated, it doesn't mean that you will have it. For example, your car that you use, you may see that they say it is 200 kilometers per hour. But most often than not, when you are driving, you may not hit the 200 kilometers per hour. Sometimes even in the night, the car performs better than when it's during the day. So you will then have, within that particular installed capacity of 200, maybe your dependable may be 160, maybe your dependable may be 180. That being said, you also then have a situation where whether the dependable is available to you, and we need to use the data that has been made available to us as a basis to do that. As I speak to you, anytime they say excess capacity, the excess capacity is occasioned when, for example, I, as an independent power producer, I have a PPA with an off-taker ECG. ECG, the agreement is that on daily basis, I should provide you with 100 megawatts of power. However, the conditions are this, that me as the producer, me as the person who is producing the power, I must declare availability. And that me, the off-taker, if I'm unable to pick up that power, then I must at least pay the capacity charge. Because remember that when the producer produces power, there are two sources of charges they give. They give what we call the capacity charge, that is for investment returns. And they give you the energy charge, which is the power they have generated based on other factors. So the arrangement is that if I am giving you that, assuming it is a take or pay arrangement, if I say I have declared availability, and you are unable to offtake, then you do that payment. So it means that the fact that you have take or pay does not necessarily mean that you pay excess capacity. That being said, we have consistently stated, yes, that the NDC government coming into power at a time when we had deficiency in terms of generation capacity, and therefore there was a need to add that. And it's something you recall that in 2006, we had power crisis. And the power crisis, the analysis of it was because for over 6 to 7 years after the after the last commissioning of a thermal plant, that was in 2000, that was the Tico plant, we never invested in generation. And so by 2006, we had run out of generation, and therefore demand had outstripped supply. On the strength of that, we went into power crisis. So we had this at the back of our mind, that in 2009, when the Mills government came, already there was an agreement that had been made between government of Ghana and Asogli on a take or pay basis. And I want to tell Honorable Atachia, I'm not too sure exactly where you have that information. Go back and check the documents. On the 18th of April, 2007, the power purchase agreement that was signed between Asogli and the then Akufo-Addo's government was a take or pay basis. It was on that basis. You should go back and look at the documents again. So it was after that. So when the 2009, when the government then came, as part of the analysis, government said, look, we needed to rapidly increase our generation capacity. The government had two-pronged ideas on that. One, let's provide power to ensure that we have sufficient for domestic use. And then two, let's also provide power to take care of the sub-region because it then brings in foreign exchange. Indeed, if you ask Honorable Atachia, he will indicate to you that if you look at VRA's books now, what makes VRA's accounts look nice is because of their foreign exports of power. So this was the idea that the government made. Fast forward, we come to a situation in 2017 where the current government says that because of the coming on stream of this power, one of the challenges we had excess capacity. So we then asked, from 2017 that you came into power to 2020, then that was in 2021 that we asked that to 2020. Tell us how much you have paid for excess capacity. The finance minister came and told us that we had paid $937 million for a number of IPPs in terms of excess capacity. Then we got another, response that came from the vice president that talked about 17.3 billion Ghana cedis as being payment for excess capacity. The truth finally came out, and this is where something, because we are talking about our indebtedness, the truth finally came out when the finance minister was censured in parliament. And he then brought us the breakdown of the 17.31, Ghana cedis in terms of payment. One, this is what the finance minister said. He said that between 2017 and 2020, in terms of out of the 17.31 billion that was paid, shortfall in capacity payments was 10.1 billion. What does that mean? Shortfall in capacity payment. You will know that to have a cost-reflective tariff, that means you have a tariff that takes care of all the costs that you have put in that. You must ensure that your tariff is made in such a way that it takes care of all those particular expenditure that is put in to generate the power. In 2017, because government, as part of their political propaganda, decided that they were going to reduce tariffs, they reduced tariffs for around 17%, if you recall. And then even at that time, GRIDCO had indicated that an annual loss of revenue was going to be around 231. So I am just giving you a clear indication that because of that thing, the tariff was not cost reflective. And therefore, government had to find money to make up for that gap. And that is the shortfall in capacity payment, which was 10.1 billion. Then the second particular payment was the fuel supply payment, which was 7.31 billion. And Samson, go back and look at the tariff structure that is given by PURC. You and I pay for fuel. And so fuel is a pass-through item. So as long as I put on my power and as long as I pay my tariffs to ECJ as part of the end user tariff, I am by extension paying for the fuel. So the 7.31 billion that government paid as part of the IPP payments was for fuel. And fuel, I and you, we have paid for it. Then the third one was the excess capacity, which is supposed to be 4.99 billion. So out of the 17.31 billion, only 4.99 billion was what was paid for excess capacity, according to the Minister of Finance, from 2017 to 2020. Something, I now want to tell you something. If you look at, and Honorable Atachia is aware of it, if you look at between 2001 and as today we speak, I tell you that to a very large extent, we have actually not gotten to a state where we'll have to pay excess capacity. And this is the reason.
Okay.
If you look from 2001, and these are data given to the committee, 2001 to 2003, as we speak now, we have not had a situation where our available capacity has gone up to 3,700. We have not had a situation.
Okay.
Indeed. Oh, no, excuse me. No, just to make just one point, end up on one point. So if you have a situation where your available capacity is not up to 3,700 and your peak demand is around 3,480, that's your peak demand. Taking into consideration that you also need redundancy in your system. What it simply means is that we have not had the occasion to pay capacity charges. But remember, I define excess capacity as when the generator declares availability and you, the off-taker, cannot take. And we have not had a situation where a generator has declared availability and then the off-taker has not been able to
Interesting.
take. So that is why we think that there's no transparency in the whole idea of the capacity charges argument.
Okay.
And until we are transparent about it, we'll have challenges.
Right. Dr. Theo Champong, assuming, as we would often do in this republic, that Atachia may have a political twist, to the facts. What about the World Bank country director? Whose report should we believe?
Yeah. Good morning. Pleasure to be here. Look, both the NDC and the NPP have twisted this issue to serve whatever agenda that they're trying to push. The fact is, as we sit here currently, the IPPs are owed in excess of $1.5 billion plus, and this is counting, right?
That's right.
To the point that they are threatening shutting off the power supply, and to the point that even the government had attempted to even renegotiate the whole IPP debt as part of the debt restructuring exercise, right? If you look at the IMF report that they issued, they talk about two things, which is kind of driving or part of the debt issues there, that you've got shortfalls in payments, and then you also have arrears that are being accumulated. And so over time, you've got a big amount of money that you need to deal with. So the question really then is, if the IPPs are threatening that they would cut off the power supply, then what is the real reason that we are in this first place at all? The root causes, right? And again, I'll refer you to the IMF report that they issued a few weeks ago. They talk about the fiscal costs that the SOEs are imposing on the economy, and they particularly highlight ECG and then Cocoa Board. In the specific instance of the energy sector and this 1.5 billion that we're talking about, there are three key things that is really driving the issue, which we need to address. Some of them Atachia and then Edward talk about, but others, they're not really, extensive on it. The first point is that currently the tariffs that we are paying or people are paying is not cost reflective, and Edward made that point. So since 2018, when we did the last major tariff review, it took almost 2.5 years. There was no review. And if you recall, even during the COVID time, tariffs did not even go up at all. But at the same time, you have your CD doing whatever it's been doing in terms of the depreciation. You've got issues with the cost of fuel that you need to import. And so if what you're producing and selling, you're not able to recover enough of that, then you're going to end up in a problem where you may have to then cover that shortfall. So that's the first key point. The second key point that we need to again have our minds to is the distribution losses in the sector itself, where almost a quarter about 26% of the power that ECG procures is unaccounted for. And you need to again have a mechanism of recovering this in the pricing architecture. Then there's a third point, which is to do with excess capacity / let's talk it, take or pay, right? So of these 3 points that I've highlighted, the fact that the tariffs are not cost reflective, number 2, the fact that you've got distribution losses, and the fact that you've got excess capacity payment. In the current context of the $1.5 billion debt that needs to be dealt with by the IPPs, the first 2 factors are even more pertinent. The tariffs not being cost reflective and the fact that you've got distribution losses. The capacity charge issues, yes, it's important, but in the grand scheme of the 3 things here, it is not really the most important issue. And again, let me take you back to the IMF document again to support this. On pages 67 to 68 of the report that the IMF issues, they actually list a number of reforms that the government needs to do as part of the whole conditionalities for the program. And in the energy sector, they actually list 15 specific reforms that need to be undertaken. Of these 15 reforms, only 3 of them directly address the issue of IPPs and PPAs. So in other words, 12 of them are to do with what I've just highlighted, your tariff setting mechanism, the fact that you've got losses in the sector, and all of these are adding up to the arrears to the point that the IPPs are threatening to shut down their operations. And if you look at the capacity payments, right, specific, so just highlighting that third point, there's a document that the PURC is actually published on their website. And it shows you, it's called the PPA register, so the power purchase agreement register. And in that document, they list all of the existing PPAs that we've signed. And then they also show you when it was signed, the capacity, the conditions, and then there's a column there that talks about which ones are take or pay and which ones are take and pay in that regard. Of the 14 existing IPPs that are currently in operation in the sector, 7 of them are take or pay, and then another 7 are take and pay. But this is where it gets interesting. If you isolate the take or pay ones, and this is the document, so just for the purposes of our listeners, you can actually go on the PPA website and check this right now. All of the take or pay right agreements that exist currently were actually signed during the NDC administration. So I can highlight, for example, Senate, I can highlight Car Power, I can highlight AXA, Amandi, and then Early Power. In the beginning, for Sunon Asogli, which Edward talks about, initially, when this was signed on the 18th of April 2007, that was a take or pay initially, but subsequently being converted or implemented as a take and pay. So as we speak currently, the contracts that we have that have got these take or pay clauses in them, these 7 that I have just talked about, all of them were signed between the period of 2013 to 2016, which is under the NDC administration. So I think we need some candor in all of this that, yes, we've got issues. There were issues with the contracts that were signed and all of that. But the most important thing is that the current cause of the mess that we have in the sector, where the IPPs are threatening to shut down, electricity, is because of the fact that the tariffs have not been cost reflective, and that you also have major distribution losses there. That is the real issue.
So an expert like you, from where you sit, how do you take the assurance from political leadership that we have 1.5 billion to pay, but be assured that we won't go into dumsor? How do you take that assurance in a minute?
The solution is quite obvious in terms of what we're going to do. The first thing that the IMF actually has asked the government to do is that by the end of this June, they've got to come up with a plan. It's called the Energy Sector Recovery Plan. We actually had a similar plan in 2019, which at that time we said we're going to deal with all these excess capacity and things like that. The plan wasn't fully implemented to the point that, again, during the pandemic, like I said, tariffs were not raised and all of those issues. Right. So the solution really is in this updated energy sector recovery plan. And within that, the 15 specific reforms that the government is going to implement. And for me, I think what gives me a bit of an assurance is the fact that these are specific conditionalities that have been more or less imposed on the government. So, for example,
so the tariffs will go up.
Tariffs have to go up. They've already gone up since last year. In August, they went up, was it 27%? Just last quarter, they've gone up another 18 or so percent. And will have to go up until such a time that your CD is stable, until such a time that the crude oil prices or the gas prices are relatively stable and all the factors that drive the tariff up. But quickly, Samson, on the specifics, what they've got to do. We've got to expedite, and this is from the IMF document, we need to expedite some of the renegotiations of the PPAs in terms of reducing these take-or-pay liabilities. That's one thing. We've got to adjust the tariffs. We talked about. We've got to address the issue of ECG and their operational performance. There's the issue of subsidies and also how we actually collect, right, the electricity that is sold and never, collected by ECG. So things like the prepaid meters and things like that. There's a very clear plan on what to do. The specifics the government is going to submit by the end of this June as part of the program conditionalities. That's the only way forward in terms of this engagement. But like I said, the whole take-or-pay thing is just one small subset of a bigger set of problems in the sector. And the most pressing issue really is to do with the tariffs and the distribution losses.
Okay. I'm sorry, but I can only give you just 30 seconds of some closing remarks. The Honorable Atachia and also Edward Bauer, please. Start with Atachia.
Honorable Bauer's posture now is very clear. It's very self-defeating. And there's nowhere in the world that if you should bedevil a government with 7 take-or-pay power plants, it will not have cost implications. So I'm glad the solution will come, but let's concede the fact that the take-or-pay, even if it's 7, has serious financial implications for the state. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much. Yes, Bauer.
Okay, I think that first and foremost, I agree with Doc when he indicates that, look, the power losses within the system is a very serious problem. Because if you look from 2017 to 2022, from ECG's own documents presented to Parliament, the total indebtedness as a result of system losses is almost about 13 billion. So that's a huge sum of money. That's the first point. The second point that I need to do is that, look, not only do we have to look at the tariffs to make it to be cost reflective, the whole tariff structure, the guidelines have to be looked again. Because I do not understand why, for one reason or the other, you know that for a system like the power system, you need to build in redundancies, and you don't key that into the tariff structure. Because it has to be in the tariff structure to be able to, because that becomes a liability, and someone has to take care of it. So that is another thing. And the last but not the least, as I speak to you now, the issue of excess capacity, as we speak now, per the government's own document, the Energy Sector Recovery Plan that Doc talked about, have indicated that by 2027, we must add new plants. If that is the case, each plant takes roughly about 24 to 36 months. What it simply means is that as we speak now, in the next year or two, we will not be talking of excess capacity. Right. We will have to be contemplating on how to put in more capacity.
Thank you.
So these are the 3 points I need to
Thank you very much. And my guests have been Edward Bauer, MP Bongo, and Member, Mines and Energy Committee of Parliament. Samuel Atachia is MP Ebuakwa South constituency and Chairman, Mines and Energy Committee of Parliament. Dr. Theo Echampong is economist and political risk analyst. Earlier, I had Dr. Rashid Pelpo, MP for Wa Central, and also we had Kwame Jan, who is senior lecturer at the University of Ghana, consultant to the Lands and Natural Resources Ministry as far as land matters are concerned. We also had Bobby Banson, who is a private legal practitioner. My outfit, as always, is by Habil Scooter. You can find Habil Scooter at Ajiringano Gate, East Legon. You can call them on 0200 84 1988, 0200 84 1988. And they want us to let you know that they are having a special Father's Day promotion throughout the month of June. And you're going to get 10% discount on all kaftans. 10% discount on all kaftans. You can also reach out to them on 0200 84 1988. 0200 84 1988. They are doing a Father's Day promotion through the month of June. You get 10% off your kaftans. They have the very best of kaftans for you. I'm Samson Ladi Anyanini. Many thanks to my production team and to our guest as well. Have a good afternoon. We'll come your way next week with another edition of Newsfile.